Again? Spin the other way. Filet-o stale.
I never got around to playing SSX for some reason. It was a combination of my friends either not wanting to play it if they had it, or none of them had it because the idea of snowboarding when we live in an area of America called the Soup doesn't sound remarkably appealing. But as I grew up, there was always something fun to me about extreme sports and snowboarding in particular. I grew up on games like 1080 and Snowboardkids, so SSX has always been a series I wanted to get around to at some point. When I decided to play one of these for the channel, I decided to do some research on which game was considered the peak of the series. However, I found that every answer was in one of two parties. Well, not every answer. Looking at you, Blue. The majority of forums I found argued between SSX Tricky and SSX 3 as the best for different reasons. So me, not wanting to leave anyone out, decided,
¿Por qué no los dos?
so after playing both games back to back, is there really a definitive game to play if you need to choose just one? Well, let's find out together. What struck me super quickly about SSX Tricky was just how much of this game seems to jump out of the screen and grab your attention. It has personality oozing out of every orifice in the best way possible. From the moment the iconic remix of Run DMC's It's Tricky starts to play, you know you're about to go on a frickin' journey. And what a journey it is. SSX Tricky took me by surprise in the sense that it starts off as a racing game over a high-score trick game. The main mode of the game is a World Circuit career mode where you choose one of a few characters to start off with the incentive of unlocking more as you go. I wanted to play as JP because of this guy's constant running, man. I mean, look at the pizzazz on this guy. I want to be him. But since I couldn't play as him just yet, I had to go with Eddie and his way less impressive robot impression. Each character starts off with different base stats that can be upgraded as you medal in events. There are two kinds of events, racing and show-off modes. Racing is racing. First to the bottom of the course wins, pretty standard. Show-off events are less about speed and more about styling your way down a mountain by chaining tricks and grinds together as efficiently and as varied as possible. You will be docked points if you do the same tricks over and over, and I had a major problem with that. Tricks have always been the definitive reason I've remembered SSX after all of these years. Now, if I told you to close your eyes and imagine SSX, chances are you'd be seeing a boarder doing a corkscrew flip while grabbing their board, in your mind's eye. While I won a few events at first, I started to realize the controls were a little bit tougher to jump into and understand than I originally thought they would be. I had to do something I never do. I read the manual. I also don't know if this is every copy, but there's a typo in mine which is fine, but X seems to mean something totally different on each system, and possibly the worst typo you can possibly have is saying X is doing something and not actually meaning it. But after reading how to play and watching a tutorial that they actually include on the disc, I figured out the controls no problem. I played the game on Xbox, and it's a pretty consistent trend I see that the controller makes it hard to actually play, so I won't dock the game for that. That's more of a mapping of controls issue that the Xbox has that the PS2 doesn't. Anyway, back on track. Both kind of events are structured the same. There are 3 rounds to each event, requiring you to place 3rd or higher to progress in the next round. If you come in first twice and then 4th, too bad, start the whole thing over, or just do what I did and press restart from the start menu when I know I'm gonna lose. But even cheesing the game like that was still a sticking point to me. I played at least one of the tracks 13 times or more before progressing, which just wasn't fun at all, because I couldn't just go back and upgrade my character once stats were in place. I just kinda had to take it. But outside of that small complaint, I had a fantastic time with SSX Tricky. The personality doesn't stop at the characters either. These tracks you race on are all over the place, and that is a super high compliment. Tracks start off normal, like a mountain, duh, and eventually you go through a city and a pinball machine made for people. I got progressively more and more excited to see what came next, and I was never disappointed when the next track came around. There's also a ton of branching paths to take, so when you play these races over and over, you can experiment to find the fastest routes and highest jumps. They're just really crafted well. Besides my small complaints about getting stuck during the World Circuit and having controls not be as fluid on Xbox, again I can't fault it for that, SSX Tricky is a phenomenally fun racing game with a smooth, iconic trick system that works incredibly well almost 2 decades after it came out. It's a thrill ride from start to finish. From the moment you put the disc in, Tricky grabs your shirt and tells you it's time to party. You know exactly what you're in for because it explains its tone so naturally, and I respect it immensely for that. SSX 3 feels like an entry in the series where SSX tried to grow up, and I mean that for better and for worse. SSX 3 loses a lot of the personality I found compelling in Tricky. For instance, look at the character select screen. Instead of a merry-go-round of dancing characters, you get clip art. Tricky let you know who every character was right off the bat, like when they dangled JP in front of me, like a carrot on a stick begging me to unlock him. Another huge difference is that 3 starts every character off with 0 stats, which is a double-edged sword. You can only go off looks and who you want to play as, which is a little bit weird if you consider larger characters being easily knocked over. But it also means you don't have to worry about stats if you genuinely really like a specific character's look, and you won't have to worry about a certain character conflicting with your playstyle. It's good and bad depending on what your preferences are. The tracks are drastically different too due to the way that the game is structured. As opposed to Tricky's world circuit with tracks all broken up, SSX 3 features 3 different peak areas that feature interconnected tracks. Navigating the world means free roaming through different areas and finding snowflake currency you can use to buy gear and stat upgrades. You can either ride up to different levels, or you can fast travel to them, which is a really nice option if you want to do something in a pinch. In addition to the racing events, show-off events made their return in the forms of half-pipe, downhill, and big air challenges. And while half-pipe and downhill are exactly what they sound like, big air challenges consist of a condensed track where the point is to get mad air while doing huge combos in as quickly as possible on the shorter track. The best part of these new interconnected tracks is at the end of each peak challenge you do a final test time trial where you race down all the courses you conquered in one long event. When you move on to Peak 2, the tracks from it as well as Peak 1 stack on top of each other, and so on until your final challenge is like a 30-minute time trial where you race down all 3 peaks. It was really tense, but also a little bit relaxing to kind of just go over the whole game again. I absolutely loved it. It felt like a show-me-what-you've-learned moment. While I overall really like these new courses, one thing I missed from Tricky was just the variety. While there was some variety in the tracks, they felt far more grounded in reality, which, for me, I kind of missed the whole craziness and the pinball machine. I felt like I knew what to expect for the most part when I unlocked new areas, and that kind of bummed me out a little bit. Like, the tracks were still good, but there was so much more, what am I going to get next in Tricky that just wasn't there in this one. But at the same time, the focus of these tracks open up the possibility of intense exploration, and the courses feel way more fleshed out. While I did go out of bounds a couple of times, falling down and venturing away from the main course opened up so many alternative routes. Like, there were so many times where I was like, well, I'm definitely not supposed to be here, but then I'd find another branching pathway, and it was just so cool for that reason. I never felt like I was limited. It felt like a really wide open mountain. There's just so much attention to detail in these tracks that playing through multiple times was still fresh as I found new ways to go, and I found new jumps to get mad air off of. And my issue with feeling stuck in Tricky for a long time is relieved by the fact that I can leave, explore to get currency or do other events to medal and level up my character, and then try again. The last thing I'll mention is the controls, since they came up in the last game. While I didn't think Tricky's controls were bad at all, I did find that 3's control scheme felt a little bit more polished and streamlined. To be fair, I did go back and play Tricky to see if it was just a matter of me getting used to the controls after playing both games, but I still felt the same way. They just felt different enough to make a note of it. In conclusion, there really isn't a clear winner in my eyes. The thing about these two games is that choosing a favorite comes down to deciding what kind of game you prefer to play. Do you value track variety, or do you rather play a more open world? Do you like the tone of Tricky or the more laid-back nature of 3? To me, that's where the main argument comes from. These two games came out 2 years apart and back-to-back in the series, yet they're so different if you look past the concept of snowboarding and doing tricks that's present in both games. If you had to make me choose, I'd probably say I prefer 3 to Tricky, but not by very much at all. I love the open world and the mountain and just free riding down the slopes. It made me feel so relaxed and zen. But while it was nice to hear DJ Atomica's voice, I felt that 3 was lacking in personality that made Tricky just come alive to me. But don't get me wrong, both games are still amazing experiences, and I'd recommend both. They're both a blast, And if anybody asked me if I wanted to play SSX Tricky or 3 down the road, I'd say, hell yeah, it's SSX. And I think that means more than choosing a real winner. But that's going to pretty much do it for this episode of Under 10 Hours. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please leave a thumbs up on it. If you want to see more videos like this, you can always press subscribe, and then hopefully hit that bell icon so you never miss a video. I promise I don't do more than 1 video a week normally, so I don't get annoying, I promise. And if you've played these games before, if you grew up with them or you just started playing them, let me know about it in the comments down below. I love hearing people's experiences with the games I cover, and like, it's my favorite part about doing this YouTube thing is just sharing the experience of playing these games in 2020 or whenever you play them. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video, and again, thanks for watching and have a good one.